And welcome everyone. Sorry for the short delay, but welcome to the 6th edition of the Tech Uncovered series. Today, uncovering product and project management. When we started this series a year and a half ago, this was really meant for people to meet, and we managed to meet only once. And then it was always online. So to have at least a little bit of meeting, this time you have a hybrid form of the meeting. So you will enjoy great speakers today. You'll enjoy great view. And I know you didn't join for me, you joined for the speakers. So I'm giving the floor to Johnny, who will be the host for today. And he will tell you what's there for you to wait for. All right, enjoy.
Thanks, Honza. So I guess we'll start with a round of short introductions. Hey, I'm Johnny, Director of Product Design at Outreach. We're a B2B SaaS scale-up, and we're building a leading sales engagement platform. We essentially help our clients get their awesome products and innovations to their customers quicker and cheaper and faster. And we're about 70 people here in Prague, close to 1,000 around the world. And you know, we're building an R&D center here, and so like most other tech companies, surprise, surprise, we're also hiring across engineering, product, and design. And yeah, awesome to be here. Jirka.
Thank you, Johnny. I'm Jirka. I'm the Chief Product Officer here at Mews, because we're on the rooftop of Mews. And what we are doing is that we're trying to really elevate and create a remarkable experience for hotels and their guests. You can imagine it, you know, if you've ever stood in a hotel in front of the reception desk, and you were thinking, okay, why does it take so long to get into my room? That's what we thought, and that's why we started Mews, to fix the experience. You know, I've never seen anyone trying to say, okay, I'm really looking forward to coming to the hotel and showing my passport as the first step. So these are the things that we're focusing on. And we now have over 2,000 customers in 65 countries.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hi everybody, my name is Hubert Pahn. I'm the founder and CEO of Productboard, product management platform that helps awesome product managers like many of you out there get the right products to market faster. We have 4,500 companies, or over 4,500 companies as customers, including companies like Zoom, Zendesk, Autodesk, Microsoft. A lot of great companies making really great products. I'm excited to be here with you all.
Yeah, my name is Philip. I'm lead technical product manager in Shipmonk. Shipmonk is a US-based company. Currently, we have 3 warehouses in Florida, California, and Pennsylvania, here to New York, and we are doing fulfillment. I'm not sure if everybody knows what the fulfillment is, but basically it's a third-party logistics. So if you imagine that you have an e-shop, and you know, usually you sell some goods and you got your own warehouse. What do we give you? We just simply synchronize with your e-shop, with your marketplace, receive your goods to our warehouses, and once we get an order, just pick it, pack it, you know, choose the best carrier to handle it, and deliver to the end customer. The end customers can differ, you know. It can be end customer from e-shop, it can be retail store, some kind of like Macy's, Target, and stuff around retailers in America. So in company, I'm currently like 3 years, and the company has R&D team whole in Czech Republic, currently somewhere around 50-60 developers, engineers here, and more than 1,000 employees in US.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for joining us. So we're super lucky to have representatives of some of the most successful Czech startups here. So I'm pumped. Thanks so much for taking the time. So to kick things off, I wanted to share a short story with you. So this is about product management and project management. And I just wanted to reflect a little bit on some of my experiences with project managers. So before I started working for in-house product teams, about 6-7 years ago, I used to work for UX consultancies and agencies in London, and there we would have project managers. And you know, I think project management has got a bit of a bad rap recently. I don't know if it's just me, but I kind of feel like, you know, it's got a bit of bad rep recently. And actually, you know, project managers back then in that company were super useful. So, for example, I was working on a project. I was actually parachuted into a project about 1 month in, and the project was delayed, massively over budget. The client was super unhappy. You know, it looked like a big disaster. So it was me and the project manager there, and we managed to somehow like rescue the whole project. It ended up being a big success. It was mainly thanks to the project manager, right? And so I thought like it was absolutely awesome. And you know, that guy actually, he used to be an ex-Marine. He worked for the British Army before he was in Afghanistan, and he had this like no bullshit, transparent communication approach, which was just amazing. So, you know, in the last 6 years or so, I haven't actually worked with even a single project manager. So I'm wondering, where are they? Where are they, right? So that is the mystery that we'll be trying to solve today. Where are all the great project managers, and you know, why are there so many product managers these days? Cool, awesome. So on that subject, so what roles do you have in your companies? Product managers, project managers, POs, program managers, delivery managers?
So at Mews, we have cross-functional team consisting of product managers. Well, basically, you know, it's led by the trio, so product manager, tech lead, and product designer. And with them, in those teams, there are sitting developers or engineers in general, QA, and then there are some cross-functional aspects beyond those teams that are shared, like UX writers, translators, and some supporting roles. But that's really is. We don't have POs. We don't have, you know, any of the other roles that you mentioned. So that's the shape of the teams at Mews.
All right, cool, thank you. Hubert, what about Productboard?
It's very similar at Productboard. We have also cross-functional teams. It's in the same triad. Above those teams, we are organized in tribes, and we have multiple teams focused. The tribe really owns a need or job to be done, or like a big customer problem. That's how we are organized. We have 4 of those tribes, and then it all rolls up to head of product, this SVP product. So no project managers, no product owners. Yeah, that's our setup.
All right, cool, thank you.
Yeah, maybe before I just tell you our structure, I just maybe mention that, you know, we are not typical like technology company, because as I said, we have warehouses and a lot of people in there, and part of our service is happening offline. So, you know, that's a little bit different against the Mews or Productboard. So back to the structure, we don't have any formal PMs. Currently, our CEO, Jen Bednář, and his co-founders, Kevin Seitz and Vašek Ereš, they are somehow building the product, like, I mean, the prioritization and stuff around. And after that, we have the technical product managers, which is in my team. And you know, we are driving the whole thing from the beginning, like from the roadmap to the delivery. This is how we currently have it set up in our company.
Cool, interesting. Cool. So okay, let's start with some definitions. That's always fun, defining the damn thing. So what would you say is the role of a product manager? What's their value proposition? What's their job to be done? Why do you hire product managers? So here's my take on it. So I think the role of a product manager is to choose the most impactful business and user problems to solve, then find the best solutions to those problems and deliver those solutions in the cheapest, quickest way possible to the market. What's your take on it?
Well, okay, I'll start. You know, I don't disagree with the definition, but to me it's, you know, almost a little bit dry, because one thing that product managers really need to do as well, and I think it's very often forgotten, is that they need to lead the whole team towards a higher purpose, like some kind of North Star objective or something like that. And they really need to be inspiring, they need to be advocating for the product to the team, but to the rest of the company. They need to be representing the end user and the customer. And you know, what you said is correct. but they need to be kind of figuring out how to minimize some of the risks of like investing into wrong initiative, making sure that we'll fly legally and ethically, and all those things. They are responsible for these things, but in the end they are a very collaborative role that ensures that the team is heading, all the team is heading towards the right direction, and that's like one utmost important thing for me.
I mean, you guys are nailing it. I would just say that understanding the customers and their needs, in my mind, is the most important part of the product manager's job. And it's definitely the most difficult one, because understanding how the market is segmented and how the different segments differ in terms of their needs, and then evaluating what is the opportunity that you can capture there, what's the willingness to pay, what is the the level of pain that you can hopefully alleviate for those segments, and then deciding how you're gonna go step by step strategically into the market, and where you're gonna start, which segment first, which pain point or need you're gonna tackle second. That's the the most difficult part of the product manager's jobs. Like, how do you define the strategy? And then obviously everything else around the figuring out the feasibility of the solution is important as well. It just tends to be the case that as humans we are very good at figuring out solutions for problems. The hard part is to figure out what are the right problems to solve. And so I always talk about it as, focus on that and nurture your empathy and skills to understand what is it that people need in the first place.
Thank you.
Yeah. The thing is that I absolutely agree, but maybe just switch somewhere else, like because from my point of view, you're absolutely right. Like, yeah, this is the main part of job or day-to-day job of a product manager. But how deep your product managers are involved, like in technology in your companies? Because it seems that you're right, your team, your cross-functional team, and how deep your product managers can see in the technology you're using and can speed up the process of developing things.
Well, in our organization, it really kind of depends on product manager, because you have product managers that are coming from technological background, you have product managers that are coming from like a hospitality background in our case, and so that kind of determines how much they need to rely on their tech lead in the team, how much they cooperate with them, how much they trust them, because essentially they shouldn't be kind of stepping into the tech role too much. They shouldn't be understanding the like various technological obstacles, because one thing that I guess we're circling around, and that's where we will kind of create the clash between product management and project management, is that product managers need to be the ones that are thinking about how is the team affecting the business of the customer or behavior of the user. And that's their sole purpose, and that's why there are other roles to look into the technological side of things, because this is like very much their primary focus, which are the jobs to be done that Hubert was talking about.
Okay. So that's great. So I wanted to kind of pick up on a couple of themes I heard there. So I loved how you were talking about the North Star vision. So that seems like super important. And also you mentioned that actually it's about almost like finding the product market fit in a commercial sense, kind of like is there a viable market, like are customers willing to pay for it, which is also an interesting theme. And then of course the technical feasibility as we mentioned. And now, so that's a good segue to defining the project manager role. What are your thoughts on that? What value does a project manager bring?
That's a good question. because as we heard, like it's some kind of combination. Lots of these roles are some kind of combination of Scrum Masters, project owners, product owners, and project managers. And from my point of view, the project manager, and how I always thought about project manager, is someone who is taking care about a project. That's quite obvious, but communicate everything to all parts of the project. And how I like differentiate from the product manager is that the project manager really don't need to know what the project is about, because his main job is to, you know, coordinate the project, but that's the thing.
That's interesting. So we were saying that a product manager needs to have pretty deep understanding of the domain and the customer needs, or user needs, and the business. And project manager possibly doesn't need to have that. So that's an interesting distinction. What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, historically, if we're talking about software project management and software development, it started in the Agile world, or even before then, in custom software, right? So you have a very clearly defined, whether right or wrong, it doesn't matter, but clearly defined project that you're delivering on, and you're managing deadlines, you're managing resources, you're managing the delivery of it, and all the stakeholders that are involved, right? Even go to market and so on. But product management, you own the product. The product is, and the product, you could kind of argue, is almost like it is a series of small projects, but you need to figure out what are the projects, like which, again, needs for what customer segment you're going to satisfy with set of features, how you're going to price it, how you're going to market it, like all of that together. And so as a product manager, you need to have some project management skills, because you're, as you said, in the middle of it all, and you're collaborating with a bunch of people, and, you know, still at the end of the day, there's something that you need to deliver. And you need to get aligned around it and so on. But the fundamental core is understand what are you building for whom, what needs you're satisfying. And that's a different skill set.
I think the fundamental difference that we're getting to is that in product management, you're chasing some kind of outcome, and you're trying to figure out, you know, what are my steps along the way. And in the end, you don't care that much about budget and resources, because you work much more longer term, iteratively, and, you know, for these like iterations, that's kind of where project management fits into, how to deliver that iteration on time, on budget, and stuff like that. But that's a very different job.
Well, you still need to care about the budget, right? Like if
And also deadlines.
If the product that you're you know, bringing to the market is not going to be feasible because it's going to take forever to build, yeah, you have an issue, right? So
obviously, you know, but I think, you know, that product managers are not so much attached to it, because they don't see this as one of their main KPIs. It's something that they use when they are assessing the opportunity to make sure that this will fly. But then they are like, okay, we're past this. This is our estimates. That's what we go with. But it's not, at least at Mews, it's not that product managers would be, you know, every day looking at this kind of spend of the team and making sure that, okay, like, you know, let's do everything in our power so that this doesn't cost 500 euros more in development.
Yeah. Sorry. Maybe just question, you know, regarding that, because I was like thinking about it like lots of time. If it is like good way or wrong way, you know, if you don't, you know, check your budget on a feature or anything, because, you know, when you're evaluating the things in a roadmap, the estimation and the cost is one of important things. So, like, what's your thought about it? Because I never get any conclusion on that. So I heard that in Mews they don't like, I don't like, don't they really care about how it's in Productboard?
well, I when I said you need to check the budget, I meant it not in the financial sense. It's not like our product managers are managing P&L of the team, right? Like, you're not looking at dollars spent, but you're budgeting the resources and prioritizing what is it that you're gonna focus on, right? So in that sense, you need to be thinking about the budget, right? Because there are resources that are limited. Yeah. But I don't know how you guys manage it. Are you asking because you have a P&L responsibility on the P&L?
No.
Okay.
So what's a P&L?
Profit loss account. So it's like if you own like a business, if you're on a business side, you know, you're looking at the revenue and the cost, and you're budgeting headcounts and the cost associated with it. And so typically, if you're like, you own the product, like a general manager of a product, you would also own the P&L responsibility for it.
Okay.
But it's more typical on the business side than the R&D side. Yeah.
Okay. You know, I find it quite interesting that Shipmonk, up until recently, or maybe up until now, doesn't really have traditional product managers. Could you tell us a little bit about it? So obviously a very successful company, right?
Yeah.
How does it work?
Yeah, absolutely. As I already mentioned, we don't have the formal PM or product manager department, but we have quite close relationship with our business, which means like the guys who are setting up the backlog or roadmap or however we want to call it, and this it's not our part of the business, so I can't tell you like, hey, how we are doing the prioritization, because our part is, I mean, the TPMs, like technical product managers and the shipment, our part is more on like development stage and delivery stage. So basically what we are like focusing on is, to get the item from the roadmaps, in the beginning, for sure, we are getting the high level estimations, to make it better prioritized. But after we just get the things from roadmaps, try to find out the best MVP for that, because we really want to make it as fast as possible in production, because this is the main thing, to make it done and make it in production and then collect the feedback, like how it's going and everything. So we're trying to make really the smallest thing, like what is, we also get the expectations, so we get the metrics, how to measure, what was the outcomes, what's everything. So this is the part of ours. We create the backlog, we create, let's say, project for the MVP, because this is something we really want to care about. Made really great estimates with our team who is working on it, and after that we have an idea like when this can be really happen, like, and set the due date. And after, during this process, we are communicating with all the stakeholders if there are some changes, some obstacles during the development, because there is all the time something. And after that, we also communicate, because that's the thing, it's a little bit different, because let's say we have like 60% of our features is for warehouse, so our customers are associates in warehouse, so you can go to them, ask them. Sometimes you can force them to do something, which is absolutely something different than the other products do. So we are also communicating the delivery, plan how and when and where it has to be deployed. So this is like how we are doing that, like try to push it to the production as soon as possible. And this is our part, like technical product management. I'm not sure like how it is in your companies, if the product managers we are talking about like are doing the same thing as we do, like our technical product managers, or because I just make it.
Sounds a bit like delivery managers, or maybe technical program managers, maybe perhaps in some other companies. And I wonder, how do those items appear on the roadmap? How do you compose a roadmap? You'll probably have some thoughts on it, but how does it work?
Yeah. I know that just high level, right? Because as I'm not the one who prioritized the roadmap, we can.
Who does that then?
What?
Who does it? Who
Yeah. Our
roadmap?
CEO, Chen, and his co-founders, Kevin Seitz and Vašek Jareš. So basically, we have lots of way how to collecting feedback. So we have our leads in warehouses, supervisors in warehouses. We have forums, to get the feedback for anything, and these are, the team is walking through that like every single week, and try to evaluate what's good, what's not.
And if I may ask, how does that roadmap actually look like? So is this like, are they asking you to push metrics, or are they asking you for specific features to be built?
Actually, it can be both, because sometimes a project or item in a roadmap, it can be also something like, hey, we need the detailed KPIs for these pickers, because we are introducing new process and we need to measure something. So it can be both. It can be metrics, it can be feature request, it can be some new integration with the new marketplace, because we have new accounts and who really wants to integrate with the new marketplace, because they're big, and we get the requests from previous customers, so we know that this is the right way. So it can be, it really differs.
What are your thoughts on roadmaps and how things appear on roadmaps? How are roadmaps composed?
The way we approach it is that we set overall company objectives. I mean, it starts with a longer-term product vision where we're going as a company. We typically think about like 3-year horizon where we're headed, and then within that, we have a overall set of company objectives for a year, and each of the tribes then own their vision for that specific part of the product that they own, and it rolls up to the objective. So overall, think about something like, you know, target segment that you're going after, and what's kind of the theme that you're going to satisfying. So we're going as a company up market, a lot of enterprise functionality. Key differentiation for us is customer centricity as a theme, and within that we would have a set of objectives, and so that drives the overall kind of structure of the roadmap, these objectives. Each tribes then comes up with the functionality that they're gonna prioritize for specific time period. We do planning on a quarterly basis, and then the outcome of that is a roadmap. We're having actually an active conversation that prior to this, there needs to be kind of discovery, not in the sense of a very tactical, like dual track agile discovery delivery, but discovery on the level of opportunities and opportunity assessment, where you're trying to figure out what are the big opportunities that you could potentially be tackling. And that again informs what I mentioned earlier, like what should be the objectives and so on. So it's kind of like a little bit messy. It's not just like purely linear process. But think of it as that there's constant ideation and discovery about the big things that you could be doing, but only some of those make it then to the roadmap as part of the, you know, company objectives for the year. So that's the process how we run it.
Mm-hmm.
So we actually have it like super similar. The major difference is now that we are running our processes in tertiles, which are 4 months, because we wanted teams to have more space to live with initiatives and some objectives for a little bit longer. But I think, you know, the major difference, I haven't seen your roadmap, so I'll guess that that's the major difference. We started differentiating between roadmaps and delivery plans recently, because, you know, everyone's asking for a roadmap, and traditionally they would want to see.
And sorry, who's asking for roadmaps?
Like customers, potential customers, board members. It's you know, the traditional way of communicating where is the product heading. You know, it's not necessarily the best way, but because it's much better to communicate your product strategy, at least those parts that you're, you know, willing to communicate publicly. But classical roadmap has, you know, the notion of time. It's like month 1, month 2, month 3. Some people try to push it towards now, next, later, which is much better in my opinion. But what we tried to do is really you know, publish our roadmap in form of, you know, this is the four things that we will drive for your businesses in terms of outcomes. And then we have an internal delivery plan, which is after some of our planning sessions. So, you know, this is how we are going to deliver on these items onto the roadmap. But the delivery plan is something that we keep private until we are confident of you know, publishing the specific releases, because you know, you're still in a stage that you're experimenting, and the main thing is that you want to drive that outcome. So, you know, communicating a specific feature 3 months, 4 months ahead of time is kind of shooting the discovery part in the leg, because then you're kind of restraining yourself to one specific functionality or bet.
So these roadmaps, they sound an awful lot like a tool that a project manager might use if there are specific features and specific timelines on the roadmap. So I guess you do these 2 types of roadmaps. One type is the delivery roadmap that's maybe a little bit closer to a project management Gantt chart roadmap. What about you? Do you use these kinds of roadmaps with specific features, specific, you know, deliverables at specific times?
Yeah, actually, kind of, but we don't really plan the strict deadlines for a long period, because our roadmap, or the priorities and customers needs, as as any customer who is going to the warehouse can need something a little bit different. So we need to react on that also for a new business, so which is a little bit different. So this can change the roadmap a bit, but we're trying to separate it, like, let's say, small feature requests and like roadmap items, let's say, and we also have the teams split it that way. So people who are working on let's say feature roadmap features are not bothered by let's say support or small features, small requests. So but anyway, like, we don't plan like half a year to the future, like, hey, I know that in the 15th of December this will be launched. We don't have plans like that.
Okay. What are your thoughts?
Well, in our case, I mean, the roadmap really differs based on the audience and the purpose, right? So the roadmap for the board looks different from the roadmap for customers, looks different from the roadmap for the team, like the product team working on a specific objectives within specific quarter, right? The level of granularity is different, the context that you share, like how strong is the customer voice there, segmentation, how collaborative it is, differs. So we have different levels, and that's what we do in Productboard. Like, we have a customer portal that's shared publicly, and there's no notion of time. There's just upcoming progress completed, and something just like for consideration. And then internally, we have different roadmap views based on who the audience is, and sometimes it's just on the level of objectives. Sometimes it's very specific for the features and sub-features, and like all the details that the different teams need. So depends.
So it kind of sounds like you would almost want a tool where you have a set of data that you can represent in different ways, which is, I believe,
it's Productboard.
Something that you happen to do pretty well.
But fundamentally, if you think about it, the data model and the entities that we were talking about, like, it's the same thing, and then it's the same set, and then just the way you pivot it and the way you combine them, and when you choose to display status versus progress, or just like you want to abstract from it, like it depends on the target audience. So the job of the product manager is to figure out what's the right level of detail, how to communicate it clearly, how to communicate it so that sometimes the internal terminology doesn't really translate directly to what the customer context is, and so that's part of the product manager's job. Choose the right language, taxonomy, present it the right way. Yeah.
Cool. So going back to the role and the responsibilities of a product manager. Now, here's the big question. Could you launch a successful product without any product managers? I guess it's possible. We've got an example here. What are your thoughts on that? Could it work just with, super smart product designers and super smart engineers?
Well, for us it did work, because when we started Mews in 2012, we didn't have product managers. And I guess some of us were taking parts of that role, but the original team was kind of the baseline cross-functional team that was having all the context and was very efficient and effective. And we, I don't think we actually we had more designer more on the UI side, but some of the engineers were supplementing what you would nowadays call product design. Back then, we were drawing wireframes on a whiteboard, but and I know examples of companies that do not have product managers, but those are working, for instance, on like very technological products, or they are working on hardware products where the engineering lead is taking on the role of product manager. So there are like different cases where you can get away without having a product manager, but someone is taking on that role, and I think it's mainly for the scalability reason. because when Philip was talking, I was thinking, okay, how is that model scalable when two people are creating the roadmap, creating the backlogs, and that's where, when we moved towards having formal product management, that was the ultimate need. We needed to scale the function of the decision power in the company in terms of where do we take the product next. And so that was the ultimate driver for us, and I think that's what you somehow need to replicate in every company.
Okay. And then we can contrast that situation with maybe Productboard, where the founder is a product manager by trade, right, Hubert? You are still a product manager, we can say. So
I'm not anymore. We have a product team, we have a head of product, so yeah, I delegated that.
So in your case, basically, the product manager was there from the very beginning, right? Like there was a duo.
Well, yeah, so if you're talking about startups, it depends on the makeup of the team. Like if the founding team takes on the product management responsibilities, like what Philip's describing with Honza Vedash, like taking that on. So the activities exist at the company. It's just then the kind of what you're talking about, the scaling, it's the question of specialization. So if you, the bigger the company, the more specialization you have. And I would argue that, if your founding team doesn't have product management skills, you should have product managers right away. Or like if whoever is in charge of making the product decision doesn't have that expertise. You can have an engineer who's making the product decisions early on, and it's fine. You don't need that specialization. But then as you grow and you need to scale it, then you will do that. Like if you guys scaled, to hundreds of product teams, or like I don't know how you call them, but product teams, like you will need to have more specialized role there. Right? You just can't manage it.
So how far can you go without a product manager as a dedicated function, you think? Like, is there a rule of thumb where you would say, like, once this starts happening, you really need, you kind of touched on that, but could you pinpoint that?
I can be very specific. We went beyond Series A, and then we saw those scalability issues. We didn't have cross-functional teams back then, so then you need to kind of rethink the whole organization. So for us, it was somewhere between Series A and Series B when we realized that we really need to change something.
How big was the team? How many people did you have then?
Yeah, I'm now thinking that the whole company could have been 40, 45 people, and I would say 25 of them were developers. So suddenly, I had some kind of ridiculous job title that I made up, and I was trying to almost project manage all the developers and also product manage them, and I saw that I'm becoming bottleneck every day more and more. And together with me, most of the product decisions were made by our CEO, Matt, and you need someone to do that so that you can do your job. So that's kind of the threshold for us.
Yeah. That's good. I like that you have the number. It was like 45. But from my point of view, it is how the roles are changing in the company. As Hubert said, like I delegated that, and that's the point from my point of view. When you don't have enough time, you're getting the bottleneck, you're bust factor in your company, and you don't really have the time to make the good job in that position, then something has to happen, and it can be product management, it can be something else, but you need to split. You have to split it, and that's from my point of view. That's the point. Like, hey, we need to do that better. We need to do that better, and I did it best, by now, like every single other founder of any company, because all of them are, like product managers, the first product managers in the company. But after that, you realize that maybe you're not so good in that, so you need to find out the best PM in a market, or you need to build the whole team for that. But it depends on the company, how big the company is, and how R&D is big, and lots of factors around.
Cool. So I guess as long as you realize that you really are lacking those skills, that's, I guess, good. Then you can kind of bring in a dedicated product manager on board, basically. So,
I mean, you know, the product will actually force you, because as it's growing with the company, you are suddenly realizing that you can't be everywhere, you can't understand all the details. So, you know, you're physically not capable of doing the job any longer.
right.
I mean, the benchmark at scale is that you have like cross-functional team of 6-8 people, and you have one PM, one designer, engineers, QA together, right? So that gives you an idea that in the ideal, and it depends how technical the product is, how much front end there is, you know, like all of that. But rule of thumb, it's roughly that 1 PM for 1:8 ratio.
1:8 ratio. Actually, let's pause there on ratios. What are your thoughts on PM to product designer to eng ratio? So I guess we touched on PM to eng ratio. What are your thoughts on PM to PD ratios, product designer ratios?
Well, with us, we're trying to maintain one-to-one, because once you have someone who's shared in between different roles, they are ultimately cooperating with too many people. And you know, there's this famous 2 pizza rule, which is kind of based on how many communication links you need to maintain in your professional job to be able to work effectively. And that stands for everyone in the team. So if I'm a member of 2 cross-functional teams, you know, you can go with that for a limited period of time, but at some point you'll not be able to maintain all those communication links.
That makes sense. I, as a product designer, have to agree. Any kind of different opinions on
one
that?
designer in the whole company. So, you know, and that's the difference, because, you know, we are still optimizing the warehouse processes. So that's a different story.
Right. Okay. And Hubert, do you see the same?
No, what I mentioned already, it depends. Like we have some, you know, platform teams where design is like there is no front end, right? So then there's more like technical API architects maybe. But for the front end, yeah, it kind of also depends on how clear and new the domain or the problem you're solving is. Because in case of like very innovative interfaces, like you might actually even have more. And like sometimes you have associate PM supporting the main PM, and then you have like kind of like an associate UX designer. Or for periods where you're doing like very complex discovery and you're kind of innovating early on, and then as the certainty increases and you go into full execution mode, you can go down a little bit, you know. So it's really a function of clarity.
Okay.
You know, if you're copying table stakes functionality as part of your platform, like you don't need that much. You know, the investment is lower, right? Because it's clear. But then, yeah, innovate, differentiate. You might it might take forever to figure out something really cool.
Makes sense. Okay. So we spoke quite a bit about cross-functional teams. I wanted to touch on that subject a little bit. So there's been a lot of talk recently about talk of empowered cross-functional teams. And so imagine you have your typical empowered cross-functional product team, 5 to 8 people, this 2 pizza team. You have this nice holy trinity of product design and engineering. Now, who does the project management stuff? Because there is project management stuff to be done, right? So you have an empowered team that's self-organizing. Who does it?
Well, that's why there is this frequent topic of product management versus project management now, because in a lot of companies that I've seen, product managers are taking on too much project management. Sometimes maybe because it's just safer to do project management in terms of because discovering the jobs to be done and changing the businesses of the customers is at some point very difficult job to do, so they feel a little bit safer on in terms of planning resources and making sure that they deliver on time. And they need to be partially doing this. So all our product managers went through CSPO, Certified Scrum Product Owner training, so that they have the notion of how to work with Scrum and the notion of project management. but as I was saying, their main purpose is to lead the team towards the right direction. You were defining it as, what's the next step of that product, and then the rest of the team needs to be able to pick up on that and deliver that next step. In my view, they shouldn't need product manager at that point to hold their hand to make sure that they deliver, because that's why there is a tech lead and all the other engineers on the team to make sure that they estimate whatever. I was a developer, so whatever you estimate, you multiply it by 3. That's the reality of it. But that you you have the right notion of how the time flows, where you are in the development of that next step. It's very little product manager and very much on the tech lead side.
So it's the tech lead who's responsible for watching over the timelines and deadlines being hit, or
basically sprint planning in terms of making sure what are the tasks for different team members in that next sprint, making sure that they contribute to the right sprint goal. That's what we are working on heavily with tech leads.
Okay. How does it work in your companies? Like, what are the tools that your people have to ensure that things are delivered on time, on budget, milestones are hit, etc.?
Yeah, actually, we have some overall, views to our ongoing projects. We have, some like basic tool or typical tools for Scrum, so burn down charts, goals, setting goals, and stuff around. So if you're on board, you can see the goals, like how far are you from that. So this is like, from my point of view, like basic view for the typical development. But maybe back to the responsibilities of the ceremonies, as you asked before. On our side, that's a little bit different. The team lead is working more on hitting the goals and really hit the goals during the sprint, but the TPMs on our side doing all the stuff around. So a little bit Scrum Master, a little bit taking care about all ceremonies like stand-ups, planning and around. So.
Okay. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, generally, I agree that the project management, as I mentioned, is kind of a part of the product management, and how much is shared by the engineering leads or product management, product managers. It differs by the individual people at the end of the day, right? Like in some teams, the product manager is more organized and more kind of diligent. In some cases, it's the engineering lead who takes it on. I just say that beyond that, so I don't see a need for like a project manager role full time on a cross-functional team of a size of 8. Like I think that should be shared. But then as you start planning across multiple teams, and then you need to start to create some rigorous approach in how you prioritize, how you approach, how you make sure that the dependencies are solved and so on. And that's where we see more the rise of product operations. And so if you have larger teams, you have kind of product ops, just like you have sales ops or marketing operations, So that's when it's more about the standardization of the process, coordination across the teams, making sure that there is consistency, and then making sure that the information flows in the right directions across teams and so on. And then another thing, you talk about the empowered teams, and that's probably a whole separate conversation here, but it's like, what does it mean to have an empowered team? And there's a big debate between how, like, you can have the empowerment all the way to the point where you just say, okay, this is the problem, this is the goal, this is the objective that you need to hit, and then you let the team completely to figure it out. But it's kind of the slowest way also how to do it, because if you already have some knowledge and you can take shortcuts that people have experience that are in the company, what you want to do is that you want to somehow funnel the information and make sure that the team gets the experience of the other people without reinventing the wheel and without going and learning everything from scratch and so on. And so that whole what does it mean, empowered team, and how much specific guidance you give, and how much you help make some of the decisions faster rather than letting the team figure it all out. It's like letting your kids to figure out everything versus sending them to school. right? It's like, you can help them or share your expertise. So the level differs. It really differs how senior people you have on the team, how good is the knowledge of the market, how long have you been in the market, because the more you are, the more internalized experience you have as intuition, you can make decisions much faster. So it's a very complex, just like saying empowered team is actually, you could write a whole book about it.
And there is a book on that subject, in fact. And so are you saying that the seniority of the team, of the PM specifically, is a function of how empowered the team is or should be? Like how long the leash should be?
Actually, the team doesn't born themselves to be empowered. I think the whole conversation is about how do you empower them.
Okay.
Like in our case, we give them.
So you mean as a product leader or as a
as a product leader, but actually
the
the whole leadership of the company.
Okay.
Because there's some kind of basic company stack that you can provide to everyone in the company to be able to follow. It's obviously the company vision, it's the company strategy. But then in terms of product leaders, we're creating product strategies as series of steps that the teams should be taking based on some insights that we have from the market, and that's empowering them to be able to make their own decisions. And I guess then it's kind of about how granular you go in product strategy. I've seen product strategies that are literally list of features, and that's not much of strategy.
It's not a product strategy.
Yeah, that's
it's not a product strategy. Why not?
Well, that's not strategy, right? That's this is your to-do list, and you're like, okay, so where is my context? How do I know that I'm creating something that's successful? And most of the time, you will end up building something that will fail because it's no longer valuable. So the strategy is really about providing the context. And then making sure that you say, okay, so we're now in this segment, the next step is this segment, and high level information like that, or high level, that's what I'm saying, like the granularity really determines how much guidance you give to the teams. But having a good product strategy really makes them empowered, because then they do not have to be told what to do, but they can really, from that context, figure out, okay, if this is my objective and this is the context that I have, this is what we need to do.
So what I hear you say is that leadership should be cascading purpose and meaning, not to-dos, tasks, deliverables. Is that?
Yeah, like if the leadership goes to a meeting to a distant city and the plane crashes, the rest of the company should be able to run without them, right? So that's why leadership's role is to be leaders, give the context. The other perspective that you can take is, okay, so I'm a new product manager in this company, this is my third day, but I'm in my job. Where do I take my team? And it's not, once again, it's not scalable if you have to interview all the people in the company to get that context. That context should be somehow accessible to the teams.
Okay. Any thoughts on that? Do you want to react on it, or any different perspectives on this, or?
Yeah, actually, I'm thinking about it because, I like the idea, but but the reality is sometimes a little bit different, So, yeah, absolutely agree that the context is the most, valuable thing you can give to your team. That's absolutely agree. But I'm not sure, how effective is the approach? How effective can be the team? We're doing our best, or have a leader with the experience from the product who made tons of features and improvements in the app or in the product, and knows as Hubert said, shortcuts and stuff around. And this is because this is the part of the analysis of the new something. It doesn't really matter if it's a feature or not, but this is the part, to find the shortcuts, find how to make it the simplest way, to get the feedback as soon as possible. This is our approaches, to get the feedback as soon as possible. But we are not standing this like above the quality of the code, quality of the product, quality of the feature. Yeah, this is the bottom.
Well, I guess one trick that will connect it is that the insights that I spoke about, they can be from the leadership, they can be from any part of the organization, and they are also coming from the teams themselves. As they run discovery, they figure out some interesting facts that are essential for the strategy. So it's like a constant process where you're updating the strategy based on your findings and having and establishing the expertise in that product.
And it is also a function again of the maturity and scale of the company. Because if you're small and you're starting with the first teams or a couple teams, like it's all kind of implied, right? And the same person has the vision and the strategy in their head, and you don't need to really communicate it. You're like, you have that concentrated knowledge. But then once you start building more teams and you need to make sure that they are gonna go and they're gonna be independent, not just executing, but also figuring out how to solve the problems, then you can be prescriptive. You need to provide a strategic lens. It's kind of like the high-level strategy, which provides the constraints within which they operate, and it just like narrows down the space that each of the teams is focused on. So the bigger and the more mature as a company you are, the bigger need for a strategy that aligns all the teams, and shares the right context.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I get it, but maybe like from my point of view, then this approach, then you have like bigger need, to have really great people in your team. This is from my point of view the outcome of that, because if you don't have the good leaders in your team, good people in a whole cross-functional teams, then it can be like much slower or anything.
But then what you're saying is basically that you depend heavily on two people in the company that are making all the decisions, and like that's at some point it will become bottleneck. Because
yeah, absolutely. Yes, I absolutely agree with that. The thing is that we are thinking and building the product management team. That's like right way. I absolutely agree with that. But I was just thinking about the empowered team. Like you said, yeah, we have the vision, we have the strategy. I absolutely agree with that. I really love to have it also, and we have the strategy. We have where we are going, but I'm not sure if this is like something what really empowers your team, because maybe from my point of view, it's still more about individuals who are making the decisions. It can be team leaders, it can be product managers, but
yeah. So actually, the decisions are, at least in our case, becoming more and more collaborative and cross-functional beyond R&D. So just today we started our planning process for the next tertile, and we had what we call value mapping sessions, where the teams are filtering their opportunities through the objectives, and then they run a session with what we call product council, which is like different representatives for different departments that are bringing different angles, and it less and less then depends on them being like superhumans, because there's touch points where they gain more context at the right time and bring it into the decision process.
Okay. Cool. So I would like to switch focus a little bit now. Something a little bit different. So I think I have a bit of insight into how we operate, and I think we all run a flavor of Scrum, basically. Yeah, is that fair to say? Time-boxed sprints, basically, right? And am I right to say that none of our companies has a Scrum Master role? Anyone has a Scrum Master role? No?
Not yet.
Not yet.
And it won't be Scrum Master per se. We're looking for an Agile coach, but It's really towards making sure, and ultimately it more falls into the role of product operations that Hubert was talking about, creating that consistency across teams, how they work, setting the rhythm, and making sure that the ceremonies are consistent across different teams. But it's much less about like a particular methodology and much more about ensuring the consistency.
Okay. So, and who's the custodian of agile ceremonies in your companies, Shipmonk and
As I
Productboard?
said, TPMs guiding all the ceremonies
Okay.
in our company.
Productboard.
It's usually on the engineering side, the engineering leads, but we have product managers who have strong experience in like the activities or the process, the Scrum process. So in that case, they help, and it's a little shared. But I think it again comes down to the activities versus like whether you need a specific role and the taxonomy, and whether you subscribe like exactly to the T to the agile, whatever flavor of agile you decide to use, right? So it's a little bit like with the project management. It's shared or set of activities, but not necessarily the role specifically.
Okay. And there's another role that features in the Scrum framework, and that's the product owner role. What are your thoughts on the similarities and differences and the overlaps between the product owner role? And by the way, does anyone have a formal product owner role? No? We don't have it either. So, I think there's quite a bit of confusion between the PM and PO role in the industry, and I hope I won't offend anyone, but sometimes people think maybe when they do the Scrum Mastering, the Scrum Master PO certification, that they become a product manager. And I think it's a completely different thing. And just because someone's got the PO certification doesn't make them a great product manager. What are your thoughts on that? What are the overlaps and differences between the roles?
Like my understanding of PO was always that they do part of the product management job, which is ultimately the project management part. But then what I've seen, because I was even thinking about is that setup good, because I know some companies that are running like a model where they have product managers and product owners on the same team, and what it creates is the confusion that you were talking about, because suddenly from the outsider perspective you have two people that are making decisions. So then you can see that different people from part of the organization are making the first shot with the product manager, and if they don't succeed they go around them to the product owner, because he's actually planning they are planning the deliverables. So then it's kind of who is actually deciding what's the next step. Is it the product manager? Is it the product owner? Then I've seen product owners mainly in the setups where someone outside of the cross-functional team is deciding what needs to be built, and they're purely executing it.
Okay, so then the PO is a delivery manager or a project manager, really?
Yeah, a project manager, really.
Okay. What do you think about it, Hubert?
I mean, product owner has a very specific description or job description, right? In the agile framework. Again, it depends which flavor. And to what I said earlier, product manager is much more about understanding the customer's needs, the market, making sure that you're thinking about the viability as well. It's less about execution. And look, a whole agile, I mentioned already, it's a custom software methodology. That's how agile started. It was invented for agency type of work to build very specific waterfall-like project for custom software. And so you're just trying to kind of fit it to the world where you're managing product in a very different way, where you're thinking about customers' needs, segments, how they evolve over time, how are you going to satisfy them, how are you going to monetize them. It's a very different approach. So it's just the wrong methodology, really. If you're building a product as a product company, that's the wrong methodology. And that's why you have product manager as a role that has evolved for this new world of building products and bringing them to the market. And that doesn't mean that some of the ceremonies and the processes and the kind of the parts of the methodology that were invented as part of Scrum are not helpful. They are. Like, you need to get organized. There's like great ceremonies and all the stuff around retrospectives and the stand-ups and so on. Like it helps get stuff done. It helps with alignment and proper allocation of resources and so on. But the fundamental core needs to start again with who's the customer, what is the problem, how am I going to solve it with products, features, and that's fundamentally product manager's job.
So we're beyond the Scrum era. Are we in a post-Scrum era? Is it?
I would say I hope so, actually.
Okay. It kind of makes me wonder if maybe that's one of the reasons why the project manager role has kind of disappeared recently, just because with the onset of Agile thinking and philosophies where you're managing to outcomes, not outputs and deliverables, then it just makes it almost like impossible for a project manager to kind of say, like we need to deliver X by Y, because there's no X by Y, right? Do you think that's potentially one of the reasons why the project manager role is kind of receding, or?
Yeah, maybe it is basically the same thing as POs, because it was connected to the whole Scrum terminology, or maybe before the Scrum, like from the beginning. And the whole technology world is going forward a lot, and that's the same with the methodology. You could see that. One developer built the whole feature, like from the back end, servers, everything. And also in this time, there was the beginning of the Scrum. So, everything is changing. Basically, when you look on the UI or everything, that's also changing. You're trying to focus on a customer, which was not the focus on a history. So this is changing, and maybe that's the reason why these roles are not in place right now, because there is maybe that's the same, like we talked about the CEO getting to the PM team and everything. Maybe that's the same, because you realize that this role, like project manager, product owner, doesn't fit the market needs or your product needs.
Okay.
Like in the end, it doesn't really matter the naming. I think that's like the second order of things. And it's what Hubert is saying. He mentioned product company, and especially here on Czech market, I don't think that we historically have a great understanding of what product company is, because there were not many product companies, and it's really the focus on how are we as a company through our product shifting the business of the customer and making it more successful, and that's just a different mindset from what traditionally was there, because I know a lot of companies who have product managers, but they rather focus on their business results, and they are trying to figure out, okay, so maybe if we do this we have better business results, but the shift is really towards understanding the customer and making sure that you push the customers further, because that's driving your revenues.
Yeah. So maybe one idea came in my mind, because maybe because I can imagine that lots of project managers and POs doing the product manager job. I can imagine it really, really well, but maybe that's I'm just thinking like why the product manager role was established. Maybe that's the reason why, because we want to differentiate that, hey, this role is something a little bit different, but maybe they're doing that, maybe.
Right. Okay. Okay. And so on the subject of definition of responsibilities, I'm a big believer in having clearly defined roles and responsibilities, and there's this famous Google study on the effectiveness of teams that basically discovered that, well, the number one attribute of an effective team was psychological safety, but then the second one was clearly defined roles and goals and responsibilities. So, and on that subject, I think that there's one tool that's particularly helpful for that. Is the RACI matrix. So RACI stands for responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed individual. And that's a specific tool that some companies use. I know that, for example, Productboard invested in defining a RACI matrix for the PDE org. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I guess that as part of figuring out what the structure should look like and what are the responsibilities, we went through the exercise of who owns what. The one thing that I, again, would caveat that at the end of the day, as I mentioned, it depends on the individuals. And so if you draw the boxes, like what is the role of one product manager and designer and especially engineering manager in one team differs from different teams. Because again, sometimes the product manager is more technical and they can be part more of the feasibility. In other cases, it's vice versa. The product manager is more business minded and so on. So I'd say it's definitely good to define what's the set of responsibilities of the different roles, but then be flexible around that and figure out when you're actually building the teams from the individuals, like what is it that you need to complement, which skills of which person by whom and so on and so on. So it's like with any other framework, right? It's helpful to provide structure, but then you need to be flexible working around it, especially when it comes to people and their skills, and accountabilities and responsibilities.
So each team defines its own RACI matrix?
It's not as rigorous. Like I'm not sure to what extent we actually use it, like day to day. It seems like there was an exercise where we went through it, just like, to provide some clarity and more create alignment, like what are the different accountabilities of people, but it's not like it would be like a rigorous, framework that every team defines and follows and so on.
Right.
It's much more organic when it comes to cooperation on the individual teams.
Okay. What about Mews?
Well, you suggested that you will be talking about these matrices, so I admit I had to Google them because never heard of it. And when I was, going through the descriptions of that model, I'm like, oof, that's at some extent like ridiculous, because if I'm, assigning someone to be responsible through a matrix, are they really responsible? Because in my point of view, responsibility is something that you need to take on. But then, what Hubert was saying, that's where I feel very similar about it, that we have established some basic responsibilities split different throughout the trio of the team, so product designer, product manager and tech lead, where should they play the key role, and then it's really up to individuals, because some people are stronger in one side, some in another side. So it's a general guideline, but then the teams need to make sure what works best for them and how to roll with this. But I can't even imagine that we would be using these matrices kind of on a daily basis. Because I can see that people would kind of go into it so deeply that they would spend half a day defining matrices for everything, and it's something that really needs to crystallize naturally, because in the end, if I have a responsibility prescribed versus if I'm really responsible, that's a massive difference in my approach and my attitude towards my job and towards, in the end, the outcomes and results of me and my team.
So if it kind of emerges almost organically, is there not a risk that things will fall between the cracks? Like I assume you do it, you assume I do it, we both assume that Hubert does it. Like, how does it work?
Whenever you say the word I assume, there's probably something falling through a crack. So that's one thing that I'm always coaching the teams on. If you're assuming, it's wrong. You need to explicitly talk about it, but still there are the generic guidelines which we fall back into if something is starting to go somewhere else than it should be. So it's not that organic, but I think you iteratively get the hang of who's better in what in different teams. So they will fail once, they will fail twice, but it's important that they learn from it, and the third time they have it figured out.
Okay. Philip, I saw you nodding at certain points. Do you have any thoughts?
Basically we don't have any metrics in any like responsibility metrics, but the thing is that we are like thinking about them right now because from our point of view, it's like really important, you know, to have like where my responsibility starts and where they ends, and where any other team member or anybody else responsibility begins. Because after that, you know, like where you can go, where you can't go, or you know who can ask you for. So this is something what we are thinking right now.
Cool. So guess we'll be wrapping up and summarizing, and then move on to questions. So we touched on the definitions of roles. We touched on what is the purpose of the PM role. We spoke about the responsibilities in teams, cross-functional teams. We touched on why potentially the project manager or the PO role has kind of receded or almost disappeared, and then the rise of the product manager job title really more recently. Do you have any other kind of thoughts or any other topics you wanted to kind of unpack to wrap up, or was there anything else that you wanted to touch on?
Go into product management and build great products. It's an awesome life spent. Make big impact.
Cool. Awesome. All right, so I guess we'll move on to questions. Is that right, Honza? Shall we? So I've got the questions here. Yeah, cool. So first question is, how closely should a PM work with business analysts? So that's interesting. Business analysts. We actually let's start there. So do you have business analysts?
We don't.
No one. Okay. So how?
That's the job of the product manager.
Is the job of a product manager
to do the analysis.
Okay.
Yeah.
So very closely.
Okay. Interesting. So very closely because it's the same person, or the responsibilities of business analysis fall under the PM umbrella, yeah?
Yeah,
Chart
like
of the PM role.
It's like, you know, talking to yourself in a mirror and switching the hats. No, like really, you know, that's what we're circling around when we say understanding the business of the customer, understanding the customer, understanding your own business. That is the role of product management, because otherwise, how you make the great judgment of what's the next step, where to push the product further, if you don't have this context. And you know, at some point, I can imagine that you would take on a business data analyst who helps you, you know, explore the data that you have in the company in different, you know, product usage tooling, or you know, through your sales pipelines and everything like that. But that's, you know, very data-centric role. You should be able to consume the reports, but you want someone who's helping you build them.
Okay. Any thoughts on business analysts and how they interact or overlap with PMs?
Yeah, it's quite difficult to to compare it, because yeah, I absolutely agree with Hubert and
okay. Cool. And one last question. So in terms of the user experience of the product, should the PM or the BA be working closely with the designer? So I guess that's kind of partially covered as well. So, well, I guess I'll flip that question around a little bit, or just to clarify. So, acceptance criteria on stories, so the PM writes them, or the designer writes them, or the EM, or
yeah, TP, our team is doing that in our team. So, because you know, we should know the feature, the request, what it's, or the story. It doesn't really matter, like how we call it, but from my point of view, PM or in our company, TPM should know what's the definition, like what's the acceptance criteria. Like I can't imagine anybody else who should write it, to be honest.
Like, you know, if you have the business context and understanding of the customer, I'm not sure that you need to be the one who's writing them, but you need to be the guardian of them and saying, yes, like what we're working on will hit our goal, our objectives, push the customer further, because that's your role in that team. So you don't have to necessarily write them, but you need to make sure that those are the criteria that you're okay with, because you know that those are the right criteria.
Okay. Okay, Hansa, do we have time for one more question, or shall we wrap up?
Is there one?
There's one more. Shall I take it? So one more question from Slido. Are there different or multiple different product management methodologies emerging, different schools of thought, perhaps? What's happening with the state of art of the PM craft?
That's not my field.
Hubert, do you want to take that?
We compiled and created a high-level framework that we named Product Excellence. It's 3 key pillars: product vision, strategy, execution, and underneath there's a set of best practices, how you think about that. And then, broadly speaking, there's much more thought leadership in this field. How you think about opportunity assessment, and Marty Kagan has done a lot of work there. Some cases it still needs much more work. For example, in the of product strategy, he basically doesn't say anything. His opinion is it's too complex, which I don't agree with. But it's definitely a field that I think that we can look forward to some exciting new development there.
Awesome. So I guess that's a good point where we can leave it, so that people have something to ponder on and reflect on tomorrow and then over the weekend. So thanks so much for participating in today's discussion. Thanks so much for sharing your thoughts and opinions. And yeah, it was an awesome chat and discussion. Thanks so much.
Thank you as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.